Welcome to this week's edition of Stand for Ag with Missouri Farmers Care. We're thrilled that you're back with us as we continue our conversation on the legacy of Missouri agriculture. We have today with us a special guest. We'll be delving into the conversations of legacy of the past, present, and future of Missouri agriculture with Missouri's current Lieutenant Governor, Mike Kehoe. And Lieutenant Governor Kehoe is a friend of Missouri agriculture. As a cattleman himself, it's always exciting to talk about cows with somebody else who loves them just as much as you do, and a small businessman himself. So we're thrilled to introduce you to him today. We often see him out at events. He supports Missouri Farmers Care, from our Drive to Feed Kids to other activities. Him and his wife, Claudia, who are both engaged in community service and have called Mid-Missouri home for over 30 years. We just saw their whole family, him, Claudia, and their 4 beautiful children, at inauguration here recently in Jefferson City, and are thrilled to have not only a governor who is a farmer himself, but our lieutenant governor as well. So welcome, Lieutenant Governor Kehoe.
Ashley, thanks for having me on. And those 4 kids, as you know, that's called labor in the agricultural market. So when we need people to help on the farm, sometimes our kids are the best helpers.
I certainly find that when our oldest are gone, the labor burden falls heavier on my husband and I. So I think we're headed in the right direction.
Yes. Well, that's great. I know that you'll raise those kids in a great environment where they understand a good work ethic.
Yes, absolutely. The farm is no better place to teach work ethic. Well, today we really have been celebrating that agriculture really shows the heart, the heart of Missouri agriculture. And so the heart of Missouri agriculture is shown in a lot of things that we do. And we have a strong tradition across Missouri, right? So I know it's our bicentennial, and we have a strong heritage of Missouri that we celebrate throughout this year as we celebrate Missouri's 200th year of statehood. And tell us a little bit about your legacy in agriculture.
Well, I'm a first generation farmer, so I learned the hard way. I tell people all the time that I learned the farm at the MFA feed store, because when you don't know what you're doing, if you go into the feed store in the morning, or to the sale barn, by the way, you'll hear a whole variety of ways to run your farm, how you're doing good stuff, how stupid you are, all the great ideas that come out of those great environments, coffee shops of the world. I love learning farming that way, because you truly do learn some great concepts. But so I didn't really know a horse from a cow when I was growing up. A mentor of mine got me into farming about 35 years ago. And fortunately, I married a girl who's from a corn and bean farm up in northern Illinois. So she understood the work and concept of the flatland farming. But I brought her to the Ozarks. And so we brought her to the hills of the Ozarks. And as you know, we don't raise any crops. We raise rocks in the Ozarks, and obviously hay, and it's a great place to pasture cattle. So slowly but surely, we got into the cattle business. My kids were then growing up, so they learned what it was like to, help with cattle. As you know, cows seem to only calf on a rainy, snowy day in a puddle somewhere that you can't get to. So learning those types of aspects of farming and what it takes to be a successful farmer is something my kids and wife and I really have grown together in doing. And that's been kind of a cool part of who our family is. But we're proud to be that first generation farmer, way before politics, by the way, that agriculture interested me. It just so happens that at one point in time, I became an aggravated taxpayer and decided to get into politics. And thank goodness I had that farming background. But the legacy, I think, is interesting in our state because, as you mentioned, it's our bicentennial. August 10th will be 200 years old. And we just restored a woman to the top of our capital named Ceres, who is the goddess of agriculture. And what's interesting is the founding fathers, even back when this capital was built over 100 years ago, understood that we are an agrarian state, that agriculture is who Missouri and Missourians are, is that most people in Missouri understand that beef doesn't come from the grocery store aisle. They understand what it took to get there, whether they raised the product that fed the beef, whether they raised the beef, whether they're in any part of the operation of any part of agriculture that we have across the state. Our citizens understand agriculture for the most part. And so I think the important part of that legacy, though, is trying to continue to help in my role here, and certainly Governor Parson and other elected officials that are farmers, is to try to continue to help those elected officials in those parts of the state that don't understand how important agriculture is and the economic impact it is to our state. As you know, about $88 billion a year is the impact on our state's economy. And it's a clearly our number one industry. The number two industry happens to be tourism at 17.8 billion. So you can see how big that gap is and how important agriculture is in the hundreds of thousands of literally Missourians and family farms that our agriculture industry supports. Is just vital to not only who we are today, not who we were yesterday, but it's really, really important to who we are going forward. And you and I have talked, and the ag associations you and I are both with have talked a million times about how do we get that younger farmer, how do we get that younger person interested in agriculture. It's not always going to be the son and daughter of a current farmer. Their interest might not just automatically be farming like it was generations ago, because that was, quite frankly, their only option. The world and the markets of the world have opened up, and the opportunities to these young people have opened up. And so we've got to really make a good business case to those young folks on not only is agriculture a great opportunity, it's rewarding work, and it's part of who we are as Missouri. And we're both working on, with the help of many, many other people, that message to our young farmers.
Absolutely. I think we should celebrate. I love hearing your first generation story. I'm sitting here on a Century Family Farm. I am the fifth generation, not to have been particularly successful nor productive, but to have supported 6 generations of families on this original 160 deeded acres, right? Back from when the government was giving that land to original families. And so I think that it is such a thing to celebrate. You're exactly right. I know I grew up also I worked at MFA as a high schooler. And so I got to hear the wisdom walking through those doors, but know how many people that when I went to school in agriculture worked from a farm, that had an intense interest and is just as much passion as the rest of us for seeing living on a farm and seeing agricultural thrive. So I love that it's still a possibility today, and that we are opening those doors. So Lieutenant Governor Kehoe led an effort over the last 2 years now, what started as the Food and Beverage Manufacturing Task Force, which took a deep dive into opportunities in agriculture, because while that tradition and that legacy is what we build on today, we really want to see a bright future. Missouri is such a powerhouse. Agriculture is such a powerhouse. We have 10 commodities in the top 10 in the nation, everything from rice and cotton to corn and soy and cattle and hogs. And so there's so much potential here. So Lieutenant Governor, can you tell us just a little bit about that? You know the numbers and the impact and the opportunity that lays before us with the Food and Beverage Manufacturing Task Force, and then we can talk about where we're going today.
Well, sure. As you stated, the Food and Beverage Task Force has now grown into a subset called Mo-5. And what we've done is tried to identify with stakeholders, yourself, as well as our agriculture leaders all across the state, with several elected officials. I know Representative Barone and Senator Bernstein have been very involved, as well as other counterparts that they have in the House and the Senate, to say that, agriculture is our number one industry. We've talked about that till we're almost worn out. We talked about the $88 billion impact. But if we're going to talk about next generation of farmers, and we're going to talk about what Missouri has as an advantage, because quite frankly, other states in the Midwest are big into some of the commodities that you mentioned, and are trying to figure out the same things that we are. What we have that they don't have, Ashley, is it's the old adage in kind of the business, when you're looking to put your business somewhere. What did you want? Location, location, location. Missouri is at the prime spot for that distribution network with our rail, our rivers, our highways, to take that agricultural product and literally get it across the world, especially with the expansion of the Panama Canal. And so what we've looked at is, what are the opportunities? How can we grow that economic piece of pie that we talked about earlier? So that for 2 reasons. One, we can continue to keep it as our number one industry and build on that. But number 2, so we can take that young person you and I have just talked about and said, here's the business case, here's the opportunities that we have out there. And what we found is that $88 billion industry that we have in Missouri, we call agriculture, has $25 billion worth of room for growth. Now that's an incredible opportunity, a 20-some% growth we figure we can have in the next 10 years if we just do things a little bit smarter and we fine tune the production of some of those commodities you talked about, and maybe looking at expanding in areas that we're not in right now, specifically the feeding of hogs, pigs, and cattle, if you will, and not only the feeding and backgrounding, but the processing. That's a big piece of that Mo-5 initiative. There's other pieces, but that's a big piece of it. That way you can tell those young people, look, you guys understand technology better than us old people ever will. I mean, Ashley, you're way younger than I am. You understand it better. But these kids, my kids, your kids are coming up, and they know everything that they can do right here. They can run a farm right here. You and I, or at least when I started the farm, and when your great-great-grandparents started the farm, I mean, we did everything the old-fashioned way. We broke with a pencil on a feed bag and tried to, keep track of cattle, and in the old days on a horseback with a little cube in your hand. These kids now can really put science and technology to work much smarter on these farms. And I think that's right up their alley. We have to make sure that we show them as adults what that economic future is, as we just talked about, the room for growth, and we'll be able to do it. And last, I would just leave with this statistic that many of your listeners have probably heard this before, but we can't reiterate it enough. And Senator Blunt is really good at making sure he drives us home every time he talks to anybody. It took us 2021 years to learn how to raise enough food and product to feed and clothe the world. So 2021 years to get to today. In the next 30 years, because of world population growth, we have to double that. So 2021 years to get to where we are today. And in 30 years, we have to be smart enough to double that. I maintain the states that are able to figure that out the best and the most efficient way will have a great opportunity at that additional piece of pie we talked to, and give our state longevity in clearly being agriculture as the #1 industry. But the draft effect can bring some of those young kids into this industry. And that's what I'm very passionate about.
I agree. Rural communities across the state. I mean, we're talking heavy ag here, but when we add value to processing, when we keep Missouri's really top of the world genetic pool in our cattle in this state and feed them and add value to them, and then connect back with consumers, not only in our communities, but across the world, that we have that product, it's good for agriculture, but it's good for Main Street as well. And I know when I talk to leaders across the state or parents and grandparents, they want nothing more than opportunities at home, right? Many of us are really strongly rooted to our communities. And so I love the picture that it paints of adding another $25 billion just reverberates through all of those communities with the value that we can add from our farm gates out into processing.
Well, you're right. The ripple effect to the added value piece is incredible. But the other piece that COVID has brought on to us, I would suggest, is people now want to know the food that they buy, where it came from. There's a huge sensitivity in where did this come from? And so when you take our Department of Ag, Chris Chin's initiative with Missouri Grown, our initiative with Buy Missouri, you have retail grocers coming to us now across the state saying, hey, we want to put a branded Missouri product in our case. Those are the types of things that you start to think about that not only build awareness, but the kind of unfortunate effect of COVID has been that people are much more sensitive and understanding to where a product comes from, how it's grown, and what kind of quality they're getting. And I think that's right in Missouri's wheelhouse. We can hit the little plastic wiffle ball off a tee on that subject. So I want to take advantage of that while it's hot.
I agree. There's so much potential. If one out of every 2 rows of soybeans leaves the state without further value added, or 1 out of every 3 rows of corn, for instance, and right, almost all of our feeder cattle leave the state, there is just a lot of potential here. And we're going to do some focus in our podcast and some conversations later this spring about, for consumers, how do I best connect with those individuals around me that are providing everything from spices to meat that I can utilize here at home. And so we look forward to those conversations, because if we can capture as agriculture even 1/3 of this increased interest and demand that we have seen due to COVID, I think that it will do a lot of good across Missouri agriculture. Well, we are not only looking at, we've talked a lot about beef and row crops, we're looking at the forestry industry as well. So the 5 pillars of Mo-5 that are Missouri: food, feed, fuel, fiber, and forest products. And so there is potential across the state in all of those avenues. And we really look forward to making some progress here soon on lifting on Missouri's beef industry to help just do things smarter, as you said, and help build back demand. For Missouri's got some high quality hardwood forests across the southern 2/3 of the state. And so maximizing the value of them and driving demand of those high quality products is going to benefit all of us. And it's going to take a big lift to make that happen.
That's why the spirits industry depends on Missouri oak for their barrels. And as you know, that's just a small piece of what our forest products producers do, but they've also become great stewards of the land, Ashley. People used to think that these loggers are just horrible to the land and they're ruining everything. But I know a lot of these people, as do you, in the forest products industry, and they've become incredible stewards and understanding how to build production forests that's responsible, environmentally responsible to our conservation efforts, and also produces a great product for us to go back out and sell, whether it's in a floor, in a barrel, or a siding around your door. They have a great reputation now across the world for what Missouri wood products can offer.
Exactly. I love high quality, high value products like that. And we're excited. We appreciate your leadership and the vision of Governor Parson as well, in knowing that there's so much opportunity and we've got the tools to be able to capture that value here at home. I encourage everybody to look for Buy Missouri and Missouri grown products on their grocery stores, and encourage those grocers and those individual retailers to make that product offering available. Because it does build on everything that we do well here in the state of Missouri. And we just appreciate the legacy that's going to be built through the Mo-5 initiative, and the work that commodities and legislators and others are doing is going to build an even brighter future for the next 200 years for Missouri.
And Ashley, I think it's important, you mentioned a couple of times that we have a governor who is absolutely committed to Missouri's agriculture industry. He is a cattle producer himself. And I can tell you that it's not just when he's on the stump or at some event he's talking about it all the time. And he understands how important that is to the economy. The down effect I have from that is that, I jokingly call him boss, and everybody has a lot of respect for the governor. Last week, he tried to sell me some cows, and I said, Mike, those are too high. I'm not paying that much money. And so every once in a while, we have to revert back and make sure he understands that just because he's governor, he can't get these higher prices for these cattle from this poor lieutenant governor. But the point of that fact is that he's hands-on involved, and he truly understands how great Missourians and their families are, and how important the generations of farmers like you are first generation like me is. So it makes a big difference when you have that effort coming from the top.
Agreed. Well, thank you for your time today. Thanks for this conversation. We encourage everybody to stay tuned, because this is just the kickoff of a conversation that you're going to hear and see a lot more about. And this is not just something led from the top. There are opportunities for every producer of any variety to get engaged, to help lead and make a difference for this brighter future that we're envisioning for Missouri.
Ashley, I'd just like to thank all of the people you and I know are helping, because a lot of the members of those organizations may watch this. So if you're a member of Farm Bureau or corn growers or soybean or cattlemen or pork producers, all of those ag commodity groups, the timber industry group, all of those ag commodity groups, University of Missouri with Kaffner, with Dean Dalbert, all of those people are helping with this effort. And if we all pull together, we're going to make this a great success. So if you're a member of any of those organizations, continue to encourage other members as well as your leadership to really get engaged here if they're not already.
Absolutely. Know that they're working for your best all the time. Yes, thank you for that. Well, thank you for tuning into this episode of Stand for Ag with Missouri Farmers Care, as we've delved into the past, present, and future legacy of Missouri agriculture. And we appreciate your time, and stay tuned till we meet again. And we will be talking next week about the legacy of conservation and stewardship. We will have a technical shop talk conversation amongst the best of the best, those that have been recognized as Missouri's Leopold Conservation recipients over the last 4 years. So it should be a great conversation, sharing successes and failures. And it'd be one of those to tune into to fine tune your production techniques, Lieutenant Governor, from those that are really pushing the envelope and trying new things each and every day. So our best and thank you.